Keeping our people safe.
Merci. Merci, Monsieur le Ministre. Monsieur Motz.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Mott, you have 7 minutes.
Minister, for being here. Minister, I'm just kind of curious that in the last 5 months or so since you've been appointed, can you point to anything that you or your ministry has achieved? People are still crossing the border illegally into this country. CBSA is asked to do more, and they have no funding to do it. Real crime is continuing to increase. Gangs and gang gun crime and violence are still an issue, are still a problem, with no apparent solutions. I'm curious, and people in my constituency are curious, and Canadians are asking me, and so I'm going to ask you, how have you made life better for Canadians?
Well,
And safer for Canadians.
Thank you very much for the question, Glenn. Frankly, I would talk about the agencies and departments from whom I'm receiving exceptional support in some of the work that they're doing. You asked what kind of a difference we've made just as on the issue of regular migration. We've seen a significant improvement in that situation. I will tell you, immediately upon my appointment, I had the opportunity to go to Lacal and to the end of Roxton Road, and I saw the exceptional work that was being done by both the CBSA and RCMP, IRCC, in managing that situation, in holding Canadian laws, and ensuring the safety and security of our country, making sure that there was no threat of criminality or national security threat. But we have seen also some outstanding work in reaching out through communications to the communities to make sure that people clearly understand that coming into this country in an irregular way seeking migration is no free ticket to permanent residency. Those communications that we've been engaged in have worked really effectively. And I won't take credit for that, but I'll tell you. But I will tell you, Mr. Mott, we've seen a significant reduction in the number of people compared to last summer.
You've said that your work on the border has had enormous impacts. So,
Mr. Mott, I was not taking credit for myself, but I was giving credit to those who are doing the work.
Your organization, the people in your ministries. So, in the last 5 months, how many people have crossed illegally into Canada?
I can tell about 70% fewer that came across in the same 5-month period. It's approximately 8,000.
Approximately 8,000.
But compared to about 18,000.
So do you have a plan to improve border security and what that's going to cost?
Mr. Mott, there's all sorts of work being done. There are plans being formulated and initiatives being brought forward, investments being made. We are determining what capacity is required, and we're working very closely as well. There are others in this relationship. It's a shared responsibility on how this is managed. So we're working with provinces and territories, working with municipalities. But there have been some very effective steps taken by our officials who are working to manage this, and we are seeing significant improvements. We've also gone to the United States because there's a bilateral relationship and an agreement that exists between us, and so that part of an ongoing dialogue between our officials and at my level, but also at the senior official level, and our counterparts in the United States. I'd like to assure you that we've all been working very diligently to ensure that we encourage people to use.
Not everybody in Canada thinks that that's happening, but I'll take your word for it. You said in your opening remarks that you have been working diligently on the consultation process for the handgun ban, for lack of a better way to describe it. Now, I can't find in the estimates, and I'm asking you, where in the estimates do I find the costings for this consultation process on the handgun ban?
Yeah, please.
You won't find them in the estimates because we are funding them out of existing resources within the department.
Okay, so you yourself, Minister, have said that you've gone, they're important, you've traveled across the country, and yet I've spoken to a number of individuals who have been at your invite-only handgun consultation ban, and you weren't there. If they're so important, I'm wondering why you weren't at those meetings that you are supposed to be leading.
So we've been conducting consultations. There are many groups and areas to be consulted, and so both myself and my parliamentary secretary have been in attendance at either I or my parliamentary secretary have been in attendance at each one of these consultations to engage. The only exception was a particular event. I had to leave early, unfortunately, to one I was attending in Moncton, but we left senior officials in place, and there were a number of reasons.
So as part of this consultation process, you have an online survey. How many online surveys have been completed for this consultation process? Do you know offhand?
Yes, I've been advised that approximately 130,000 submissions were made by Canadians in response to the
30,000 from
130,000.
Canadians. So you are aware that you can access that consultation from anywhere in the world?
I have been advised by the officials that were overseeing its implementation that there was ways to determine the areas in which people were participating. I believe
The IPS
I believe
addresses
there were questions that were actually posed to individuals from how they were. I'm also aware, Mr. Mott, that there were a number of initiatives. We had advocates on both sides of the issue that were encouraging people to respond and perhaps respond in multiple times.
Right.
Those things happen in every
So
consultation.
you had no mechanism in place to ensure IP addresses couldn't be used over and over and over and over again?
No, what we wanted to ensure, it's not a plebiscite, Mr. Mott. What it was is an opportunity for Canadians to provide input. And,
Right.
and
So
even if they
you're
wanted to
using
provide
that for
input over and over and
Mr.
over
Blair,
again, at least we would
if
hear
you're
from them.
using that for input and you have a consultation process, you would think that you would want that process to have a reliable base to it. And if you're not using IP addresses to track, if you have limited ability to know who is completing your survey from around the world, then Canadians would, in my opinion, would be suspect as to any results that you might be able to gather from that. Now,
Mr. Mott, just to be clear,
has the Privacy Commissioner?
we did not require people to identify themselves for the purposes of completing the survey.
But you asked for gender, you asked for ethnicity.
We asked for identifiers
asked
because they
for-
were useful in the data collection, but we did not ask people to identify themselves. And quite frankly, we wanted to make sure the Canadians who wished to make a point had the opportunity to do so, that their voices could be heard, and we didn't want to put any restrictions or limitations on Canadians' ability